PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi.
I'm continuing my coverage of the World Blitz Championship final between Magnus Carlsen and Nepomniachtchi. In the previous video, I showed you how Carlsen got a 2-game lead in this 4-game match, 2-0 after 2 games. So Nepo needed to win games 3 and 4 to tie the match. Now he managed to win game 3, and this is game 4. Carlsen playing white, Nepo playing black, Nepo in a must-win situation. Fascinating game, actually, and fascinating opening. Nepo goes for a French defense, and it's the classical variation with knight f6. So we have this typical locked pawn structure in the middle. And Carlsen goes for the trendy move, as Gukesh played in the final of the World Championship against Ding, plays this old Steinitz variation. So that means that after c5, white can protect the pawn on d4 with the pawn on c3. And Carlsen goes for the move that Gukesh played, a3, this unusual continuation, which covers the b4 square. And in the past, f4 was the move played instead of this. But this is more flexible. It means that this diagonal remains open. Now, Ding played bishop e7 and then bishop e3 and, well, Gukesh got, if you remember, Gukesh got a very pleasant advantage in this position and was quite unlucky not to win this game. I mean, Ding defended incredibly well, but yeah, that was better for Gukesh. Nepo played a5, so gaining space on the queen side. And Carlsen and Nepo had exactly this variation in the Rapid Play tournament in Oslo just about a week before this. And so in that game, Nepo played queen a5, but he got absolutely mangled in 23 moves. And this shows how dangerous this position is for black. So just a very quick little digression into this game. So this is Carlsen Nepo from Oslo, just about a week before. I'm going to zip through this really quickly. So this is the point that white can build up an attack very quickly. Very important. Keep the queens on. Bishop d3 already. There are threats on the king side. This rook joins the attack. Let's get the queen out of the way. Knight h5. So threats take on h6 with the bishop. Rook g3. White's pieces lining up superbly. And queen takes h6. And queen g6. And here Nepo resigned because knight g5 is coming. And queen h7 mate. Absolutely brutal. 23 moves. So it was incredible that Nepo was willing to repeat this line in this final of the World Blitz. But he had something ready. He played knight b6. So it's similar to how Ding played it, except Nepo has gained space with a5, a4 first. But Carlsen starts to maneuver on the king side, knight a5. So instead of leaping in straight away with knight c4, knight a5. So looking to conquer these squares. Rook b1, preempting a knight b3. Bishop d7, bishop d3. I mean, I have to say, I really enjoy playing the French, actually with both colours, but I do like it when white gets this very nice development. You know, there's no pressure on the centre and white is able to use that space advantage to attack on the king side. This looks such a beautiful position for white. But Nepo has found a way to play this. Queen c7. So basically, he's not committing that bishop yet. And he's looking to castle queenside and then perhaps counterattack on the king side. But you can only do this if you're secure on the queen side. And that's what he's managed to achieve with these moves. So the knight moves in. Knight h5. So obviously the bishop can't move. And bishop b5. Supporting the knight. And very interesting moment in the game. You know, how does white play? Because, you know, the knight looks good on h5. The bishop looks great here. But how do you make progress on the king side? You know, what's going to happen when black castles queenside? What do you do next? So Carlsen decides to keep the position really fluid. So if Nepo is going to castle queenside, then he wants to sort of keep the centre a bit open. So very interesting decision to exchange on c5. There we go, knight d4. So having put the knight on d4, it means that this queen can perhaps move over to the king side. And the knight looks like it's on a beautiful blockading square on d4. Bishop comes back, queen g4, so potential threat here. So castles queenside. There we go, the king escapes. So, yeah, very different from that 23 move loss in Oslo. The king goes the other way. So it means that if this is taken, then of course rook g8 pins. So you don't want to entertain that thought. So queen f4, hitting f7. And the queen comes back, queen e7. So now there's potential counterplay with g5. Carlsen has to watch out for that the whole time. Really tricky position. You can see these knights are kind of, you know, lock the queen side to some extent. So how does Carlsen play from here? Well, he goes for b3, opening up the queen side. I mean, very logical. When black's king is here, you just want to open up that b file as quickly as possible. So Nepo has to exchange. And, well, it looks like Carlsen has achieved something here. But bishop c6, now that is an excellent move. So that bishop protects the pawn on b7 and comes to the long diagonal. So that means, well, I think Nepo would be delighted if that knight is exchanged off for the bishop, because it means the bishop on c6 would come into the game. So Carlsen doesn't want to take there, not for the moment anyway. Bishop e3, yeah, that looks right, because that makes room for rook number 2 to come over. And also the bishop looks pretty good on this diagonal. g5 played. So Nepo has to create counterplay. Queen moves over. Pawn takes. Okay, you can see that you know, this is where Nepo wants to try and generate some chances. Knight f6, so that stops the rook coming to g8. I mean, it still feels to me as though white is doing incredibly well in this position. But actually, it's really not so clear anymore. I mean, one way to play would be to exchange off the knight for that bishop and put the queen on c5. You know, that endgame shouldn't be too bad for black. But Nepo plays in a different way. Bishop g7. So in some ways this is a lot sharper. Rook b1. So Carlsen, you know, looking to play, of course, actively and hit that pawn on b7. Nepo exchanges off that knight and puts the queen on c7. So having got rid of the knight, then a rook can come to the g file, and the queen protects on the queen side. Queen a7. I mean, that's the kind of move you play in a flash in a blitz game. So there are now 1, 2, 3 pieces lined up here. Potentially a check on a8, and nothing doing at the moment because the king can escape to d7. Rook g8. Well, things are really building up to a climax now with both players attacking. So now there are potential threats on the g file. I mean, the bishop could drop back to defend g2, but I mean, this doesn't control the position. h3, and obviously there are threats there. Looks unpleasant. So Carlsen decides to go for it here. He plays bishop f4. Now, that needs to be taken because if e5, then the bishop comes to f5 check. And if bishop d7, rook takes b7. So this is just collapsing. So that bishop needs to be taken. So this is the game continuation. And Carlsen took on b7. So he's the first to break through. Obviously, if bishop takes rook, then queen takes bishop is checkmate. Right. As I said, we're reaching a climax in this game. Nepo has to win this game to tie the match. Right. How would you play with black in this position? Black to play. I'll have a drink, you have a think. What would you do with black? Now, I find it unlikely that either player had calculated this through right to the finish. Maybe Nepo had after queen takes bishop, actually. I mean, his calculation is so rapid. I doubt whether Carlsen had thought this one through. Maybe he just assumed this was winning or just was hoping this was winning for white. In any case, Nepo turned things around with rook takes g2. King takes played by Carlsen, and now here is the move that Carlsen presumably had overlooked, but Nepo had seen. An amazing tactic. Knight e3 check. And at this point, Carlsen resigned. It's a brilliant move. For a blitz game, I think this is absolutely fantastic. So why did Carlsen resign? Well, if the king retreats, then it's going to be mate with queen g4 and queen g2 check. So this has to be taken. Well, what about pawn takes? Then rook g8. And again, this is going to be checkmate very, very quickly with a check from the queen and checkmate. So what about queen takes? Well, in that case, d4 check. That bishop comes good. The bad French bishop proves to be, excuse me, an absolute monster. Checking the king and also threatening the queen. So if bishop e4, then that can just be taken. And this leads to mate because, well, there can be lots of checks, but actually the king just escapes up the board and the king is safe. An incredible finish. Yeah, by the way, knight e3, I mean, that's really the only move to win. If d4, then in fact, black has nothing more than a draw in that position. And if queen g4, again, that's not good enough because actually the king incredibly escapes in this position. So knight e3, the only move to win. Brilliant move. So yeah, Carlsen resigned here. So that meant the score in the match was 2-all. So they then played sudden death blitz games. But there were 3 draws. Both players played, I think, fairly carefully in those games. And after 3 draws, Carlsen proposed to Nepo that they share first place in the championship. And apparently they approached the FIDE officials and said that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to share first place. And they agreed, FIDE agreed to it. Which baffled many of us watching. So, well, I can understand why players wanted to do that. It was Carlsen that proposed this solution to Nepo. Nepo agreed. Carlsen said, well, we've had a long day, and they were very happy to share first place. It's unusual. But why did FIDE agree to it? Well, I think, one, it shows where the power lies at the moment, actually. I think after Jean's Gate, well, there's a kerfuffle about the trousers that Carlsen was wearing in the rapid play. Anyway, I won't go into that. But basically, I don't think FIDE wanted another confrontation with Carlsen. That whole business did not put FIDE in a good light. Besides, I think this solution to share first place rather suited the FIDE president, Arkady Dvorkovich. Of course, he's from Russia. And having a Russian world champion puts Dvorkovich in a very good light with Moscow. He is delivered for Russia with this solution. And sure enough, Nepomniachtchi swiftly received congratulations from President Putin. The Russian leadership can use Nepo's success. It shows their own people that the relations with the West are perhaps more normalized. It's a success for Russia on the world stage. It's used for soft power. Of course, Nepo was playing under the FIDE flag, not a Russian flag. However, that's just a bureaucratic finesse. So, yes, it suited the FIDE president, Arkady Dvorkovich, to agree to the players sharing first place. And he has form on this one. If you recall the online Olympiad in 2021, where there was some dispute in the final between Russia and India, and Dvorkovich agreed to sharing first place there as well. So he has form in this kind of compromise, but it definitely suits him. There you go. I hope you enjoyed that coverage. I might show a couple more games or something else in future from the FIDE World Rapid and World Blitz. But anyway, for the time being, thanks for watching.